What's up everyone? While working on my third-person MOBA style shooter, I have been researching character controllers to see what kind of feel for my game I want. Going through some of the more popular games, I realized just how many different ways you can create a third-person character controller. I've composed a video showcasing the best character controllers out there at the moment, and I'll talk through a few key features and things you might need to consider when making your own. Alternatively, feel free to just mute me and watch through all the character controllers. I found it hard to sift through hours of gaming content to find the right character controller that was right for my game. So instead of doing that yourself, here they are. So I am basing my controller off the game Caliber. I love everything about this game feel and how the character responds, and I would like to recreate that feeling for my own game. The first thing you might need to consider when creating a character controller is what will happen when the player is instructed to run towards the camera. Caliber, as you can see here, will never be able to face any other direction other than where the camera is facing. We can only run forward, strafe, and run backwards. A game mechanic of mine will require line of sight, so for me it makes sense to make sure the character is always facing where the player is looking. Other games like GTA and Synced allow the characters to face and run directly towards the camera. Personally, I don't find the immediate snapping 180 degrees when scoping to feel very realistic. It would also feel very unfair in my arena-based shooter environment. I couldn't imagine dying to someone running the opposite direction when all of a sudden they snap 180 degrees and headshot me. It might work for some people, but that would be a reason for me to keep the functionality out of my game. So back to Caliber. We always face the camera, that's step 1. What about when the user stands still and rotates the camera? Now this is a cool mechanic I really liked and have implemented it into my controller. Firstly, the character body and head will move to face towards the camera. This makes it possible to not have to rotate small amounts when the player is panning the camera around. It also creates a nice effect that the player is tracking exactly where your crosshair is. When the camera reaches a certain angle based on the character's forward vector, it will rotate appropriately with a small foot movement animation. Here is the same mechanic implemented into my own character controller. When the angle from the player's forward vector to the camera's forward vector is greater than 80, players step left or step right animation and rotate the character appropriately. Other character controllers will simply let you rotate the camera while your character waits for input from the controller or keyboard. From there, it is a bit tricky in how to handle the rotation to the position you want to travel. Ghost Recon has a very quick, almost impossible rotation step, but succeeds in hiding this through an elevated camera. GTA has the most unique and some would argue frustrating character controller out there. The character requires whole, natural movements to find the position you are moving to. While it looks the most impressive and is very true to real life, it makes it more difficult to make finer, smaller movements. Focus largely on realism and the single player experience and not so much accurate gunplay, it's not necessary for the character to require the same movement mechanic as the other more competitive games. Another decision you will have to make is whether you want your gunplay to remain third person or to switch to first person when aiming. I was originally looking into remaining strictly third person, but seeing how Caliber handles the transition, I think it works smoothly and combines the two perspectives really well. I can keep the aesthetic of being a third person perspective with the feel of being a first person shooter. Not all games do this though. GTA was always a third person game until their first person shooter update allowed people to use the game in first person view. In fact, a lot of games stick to the over the shoulder view when aiming a gun. No one can tell you which one is better, FPS. Each option has its merits, you just need to weigh out what kind of gameplay experience you want the user to have. Another thing you might need to consider is how your character is going to hold all of your weapons. You have two options, have a magic bag where weapons presumably spawn from your character's butthole, or attach the weapons visibly on your character's back. The latter works well in theory, but putting it into practice where you only have a half dozen mix-em-up animations to work with is proving quite difficult. If you are looking to have an infinite amount of weapons at your disposal, I would not recommend having them visible. The realism factor might be lost when your 60kg protagonist is hauling a metric ton of twisted metal. GTA opts for the infinite armory where others like The Last of Us keep to the realism. Then there is Caliber who just seem lazy, not having an infinite stash of weapons but also not worrying about where they disappear to when holstered. Watch this space where I take the same route when the weapon swapping falls into the too hard basket. So that's it from me. I've scoured the internet to find some good gameplay of third person shooters to help anyone out that needs some references. I'll leave you with some more gameplay and see you all in the next video. Thanks.